Active versus passive voice. So today we will learn about the difference between using the active voice in English and passive voice. We'll understand the main difference between an active and a passive voice, learning how to avoid passive voice in writing, and how to integrate active voice in writing. The active voice is more commonly used in English writing, and it's ideal for writing papers or essays. The active voice occurs when the subject is doing or acting the action by the means of a verb. And because the subject is actively creating an action, it is called the active voice. Let's go over some examples. First, we have the cat is chewing the toy. The cat will be the subject of the sentence. Chewing is the verb. And because it is an active voice, the subject physically does the verb or acts upon the verb. Next, we have she writes a novel. She is the subject of the sentence. Writes is the verb. The novel is the direct object, and the subject does the verb, which is writes to the novel. Again, physically acting upon the direct object. Next, we have he screams. He is the subject of the sentence. Screams, again, is the verb. And as we can see, the subject is physically acting upon doing the verb. Now let's go over some more examples. He runs around the track. She sleeps soundly. The cat walks. The dog growls. The dog bites the bone. The baker makes a cake. Bob recycles the water bottle. He writes notes. Let's take a look at the similarities. So as we can see, all include a subject at the beginning, such as he, she, cat, dog, and all the subjects are actively doing the verb. As we can see with sleeps, walks, growls, the subject is doing that to the direct object. Now let's take a look at the other side, which is passive voice. Passive voice is usually to be avoided in English writing because it makes writing less smooth, clear, and more murky. Here, the subject is acted upon and by the verb, but unlike active voice, it is not actually doing the action or doing the verb. Let's go over some examples of passive voice. First, we have the bacon was eaten by the boy. Here, the bacon is placed at the beginning of the sentence. However, the bacon is the direct object. The verb is was eaten. Passive voice verbs include usually a to be verb such as is, was, were, and a past participle such as eaten, written, kept, slept. The boy is actually the subject of the verb, located at the very end of the sentence, and is followed by the word by. Next, we have the novel is written by Sarah. Again, the novel is the direct object. The verb of the sentence is written. Sarah would be the subject of the sentence. And while the direct object may be placed at the beginning of the sentence, recognize that Sarah is actually the subject of the sentence and placed at the end. Lastly, we have the trees have been cut by the loggers. We can also familiarize ourselves with passive voice by using several other terms. For example, the trees can also be the receiver of an action from the loggers, which is another word for direct object. The loggers would be the doers of the action, also the subject. And have been cut will just be the action or the verb in the sentence. Let's go over some passive voice examples. The goods are brought by Joe into the store. The meat has been cooked by the chef. The dog is walked by Cameron. The kitchen has been swept by him. The stone will be removed from the construction site. The letter has been mailed by her. The cookies have been made by Connor. The floor is cleaned by her. Let's take a look at the similarities. They all include the direct object at the very beginning of the sentence. And they have a to be verb with a past participle. All have the subject at the very end of the sentence, which is followed by the preposition by. That signals where the subject is in a passive voice. Let's go over some more to be verbs. These are verbs that are usually used with the passive voice, and we can recognize them because of several words. For example, the subject I will use am in the present and was. The subject you will use are and then were. So the subject he, she, and it will use is and was. The subject we will use are and were. The subject you all, also known as y'all, can use are and were. Lastly, the subject they will use are and were. We also have the past participle in the passive voice, which is the second part. It is basically the form of the verb in English that is in the past tense, and it usually ends in ed or en, and is broken down derived from an infinitive. So for example, here we have a list of infinitives. We have the infinitive to be, and the past participle is been, to eat, which is eaten, to see, which is seen, to watch, which is watched, to write, which is written, to laugh, which is laughed, to take, which is taken, and to play, which is played. As you can see, all the past participle forms either end in en or ed. Obviously, there are irregular forms, but these are the main ones that end in ed or en. Let's go over the general format of the active and passive voice. For the active voice, we have a subject plus a verb plus a direct object. For example, the dog as the subject eats as the verb, the food as the direct object. Next, we have the child as a subject, takes as the verb, the toy as the direct object. Now, let's move on to the passive, which is slightly more complicated. We have the direct object at the beginning, a verb consisting of a to be and a past participle with the word by and at last the subject. So the toy is taken by the child. The food is eaten by the dog. Now let's go over why active voice is actually better. First, it uses less words, which makes the writing more concise, flows better, and more clear. And because we use less words, it allows for faster moving essay, plot, and story. Also, it's generally easier on the writer, which makes easy writing, and overall less likely to make grammar mistakes. Overall, it cleans up the entire narrative, and it's stronger, more direct, and more active. Now, here's how we can convert a sentence from the passive voice to the active voice. First, we have, the squirrel was chased by the cat. This is in a passive voice. The squirrel would be the direct object. The cat is the subject of the sentence. Was chased is the verb of the sentence. Now, all you have to do is switch the words around. Let's put the subject at the beginning of the sentence. Here we have, the cat chased the squirrel. As we can see here, the verb has changed from a passive to active by getting rid of the to be verb. Now, the squirrel is at the end of the sentence because it's a direct object. Let's try some more examples. Here we have, the mouse is chased by the cat. The bug was killed by the spider. The book was borrowed by Tim. The student was called on by the teacher. The hammers were carried by the blacksmiths. Here are the answers for the first exercise. Now, let's see if we can spot the difference between an active voice and a passive voice. Here we have, the butterflies are catched by the child. The dog growls. The shell is taken by her. They eat the watermelon. She does homework. Here again are the answers for the second exercise. Lastly, if you need any more help or questions about it, there are lots more grammar articles to learn about the difference between passive and active voice. First, we have an explanation video, which will explain more differences between active and passive. There are also more English grammar exercises on the difference between these two voices.